Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio, where we provide actionable health information on a week-to-week basis that can help you improve your life. Feel free to head over to justinhealth.com, where we have various opt-in video series on more in-depth health topics such as female hormones, thyroid, and gut health. Also, while you're there, feel free and schedule a consult with myself, Dr. J, and or my colleagues. We're available worldwide to provide natural health support for any of your major health issues. Again, welcome to the podcast and enjoy the show. Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani here with Evan Brand. Today we're going to be chatting about functional medicine solutions for bloating. Really excited to get to the root cause. Evan, how was your weekend, man? What's going on?
Oh, not too much. It was very good. I'm excited to dive into this topic. I figured we would divert from the coronavirus. We've done, hours and hours and hours and hours of content on that. And what we're still seeing clinically is that people still have issues outside of that, being concerned with that. And one issue that's popping up pretty much every single day, and that could be because we focus so much on helping improve gut health in people, is the issue of bloating. And people will come in with these sort of preconceived ideas of what's going on. They'll say, oh, I have bacterial overgrowth, or I have this, or I have that, I have parasites. And that's what they think is going on. But in a lot of cases, and this is why you and I focus so much on doing advanced lab testing, in many cases, the people are wrong. What they thought was wrong with them is not what's wrong with them, and then we find a different solution. So why don't we dive straight into the testing, maybe talk about some of the tools that we use to investigate these issues, and then we could dive into maybe the specific things that we're seeing that are these triggers or root causes.
Absolutely. So when we look at root cause, we always want to draw a line between root cause and then palliative solutions that may help symptomatically. We always want to draw a line, right? And of course, there's palliative solutions that are more conventional based, right? Whether it's like bloating, whether it's gas X or some type of drug to address Imodium or something else on the tummy side that's going to just manage symptoms on the drug side, right? And then there are even more natural things to do the same, like activated charcoal, right? And then there are some things that are more palliative but may connect into the root cause, like digestive support, like enzymes and acids. As part of a lot of bloating issues, there tends to be some kind of a gut infection or gut stressor followed by low stomach acid, low enzymes, low bile salts. So there are some palliative things we may throw into the mix that may help support and allow us to feel better, but they're also part of the root cause. So we want to always plug in solutions, but also make sure we're checking back to the root cause so we're making sure that everything connects. Palliative, root cause, and they all want to connect. And ideally, we're choosing root cause stuff that's going to be more natural, that's in alignment with what your body needs for good digestion to begin with.
Yep, well said. And there could be a lot of overlap between the palliative stuff and the root cause stuff, like the enzyme is a great example. So testing-wise, what are we looking at? How are we identifying the root causes of bloating? Number one is stool test. We do a DNA stool test on pretty much every single person. Unless they've already had something run and there's very good or recent testing from a previous practitioner or doctor, then we may use that. But in most cases, we're looking at a DNA sample to try to figure out what's going on. And not only what's going on, but what specific species of bacteria, what specific pathogens like worms, what specific parasites, what's the gut inflammation look like, what's the gut barrier look like, what about H. pylori? Is that going on? Because if enzymes make you feel better, are enzymes making you feel better because you have an H. pylori infection that's suppressing stomach acid? So I would say stool test is probably the best, but not always the best place to start testing-wise. What would you say?
Absolutely. So, we look at underlying physiology, right? You can tell a lot by underlying physiology with symptoms. The difference is a good functional medicine doctor is going to look at the symptoms and go upstream to the body systems that may not be functioning optimally. So if I'm seeing indigestion, I'm thinking, okay, maybe we don't quite have enough enzymes and acidity to activate our digestive support, right? Because we need nice low acidity, right? Low acidity is like a pH of like 1.5, 2.5. That helps activate enzymes. And the acidity also helps then trigger bile release once that chyme goes into the small intestine. And it also triggers more pancreatic enzyme release, whether it's lipase or protease. These are enzymes that break down protein or fat. So we need that acidity. Also, acidity makes it harder for bacteria to grow. So think of acidity as like it's like the Clorox bleach on the dirty picnic table, right? It just really kind of cleans things up and makes it really hard for a lot of the not so nice guys to grow. So we know that's kind of a foundational tenet, and that's always good to look at that. Now, we have other outside things like emotional stressors, and any type of emotional stressor or any type of stressor plays into the adrenals. Because when we activate the adrenals, we're either surging cortisol or adrenaline, right? One's from the outside of the adrenal gland, right? The cortex, that's cortisol. One's from the medulla, the inner part of the adrenal gland, either the inner half or inner third, and that's going to be surging a lot more adrenaline, right? Both are intimately connected, right? Adrenaline gets to the scene first, cortisol follows by about 20 minutes, okay? And these are going to activate a fight or flight sympathetic nervous system response. And that nervous system response will take blood flow and shunt it away from the intestines and bring it to the arms, hands, and feet so we can run, fight, and flee. So if we have emotional stress that's unresolved, or we're putting our body in stress from food allergens, or from eating on the go, or not chewing our food up well enough, or just consuming a lot of toxins in our food, whether it's mold or pesticides or chemicals, that could be activating that fight or flight response. So that's why looking at the adrenals can be helpful, because if we have this chronic digestive stress, that could be stressing out the adrenals. And a lot of people that focus on digestion in the functional medicine world, they don't ever bridge the gap between digestion and hormones, and they really come full circle.
Yep. So that's your answer. Your answer is, what would the next test? My question was, what was the next test you would say is important for investigating bloating? So your answer would be adrenals.
The adrenals will be a really important part because the fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system is helpful. Now, again, this is going to be more on the chronic element. This is like a chronic issue, right? If this is more of an acute problem, the adrenals may be at play, but they may not be a big piece in that person's healing recovery. But it's always good to look at, because the problem with stress, people associate stress, like when you say emotional stress or stress, you're thinking like family, kids, finances, work, right? The problem is if you have an underlying Giardia infection or H. pylori infection, even though you're on a beach totally relaxing, drinking Mai Tais, you are still going to have stress in your body that could be activating a little mini sympathetic nervous system response because of the infections. So that's why the gut stuff, if it's chronic, it can be under the surface and you may not even be perceptive of what's happening.
Yep, and that was my case. I mean, I had Giardia and other infections. My adrenal test looked terrible.
You had three amigos, right? Yeah,
it was the H. pylori, the Giardia, the crypto, and when I ran an adrenal profile, I didn't feel stressed, right? I was taking a lot of adaptogenic herbs, so maybe that was helping. But if somebody said, "Are you stressed?" I'd be like, not really. But when you looked at my adrenal profile, my system was clearly stressed. So I'm glad you pointed that out, that even though you don't, quote, feel stress, or you think your life is fine, or, oh, my kids are great, my husband's wonderful. It's like, okay, cool, but that doesn't matter, actually. You could have plenty of, quote, adrenal stress and have nothing going wrong in your life at all. But that, and let's take this a step further. So you mentioned the cortisol release and all of that. So what is that actually doing to affect the gut? Well, the cortisol it's catabolic. It eats things away. So, you'll read or hear about people who go run a marathon and then they'll have diarrhea. That cortisol just tears apart the gut barrier. So I'm sure there's other mechanisms involved, but to me, that's one that comes to mind.
Yeah, also you can look at post-marathon and then look at immune system deficiency. You'll see chronically low, or at least, for a few days to a few weeks on the low IgA side, from long-distance aerobic exercise. So you could be over-exercising or just doing too much aerobic, and that could be really compromising your immune system, right? So that could be playing a big role as well. So like you mentioned, chronic cortisol can rip up that gut lining, and then the more that gut lining is ripped up, greater chance of food allergens. So then now if you're consuming, questionable foods, there's a greater chance that you may start reacting to those foods as well.
Here's the funny thing. I'm thinking out loud. So in terms of like BuzzFeed type titles, I kind of brought this up to you before we hit record. I'm like, hey, let's do something on like top 5 causes of bloating. But the funny thing is, when you're a practitioner, it's really tough to just go number 1, number 2, because as you see, you and we're connecting all of these dots. So we could end up coming up with more of like 20 different mechanisms leading to the bloating. Whereas people, when they go to click on an article or something, they want it to just be 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, or 5. But when you really do functional medicine and you see this stuff clinically, it just doesn't work like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not like a car where it's like, okay, it's a bad carburetor, remove the carburetor. No, it's like, okay, you got the adrenal stress from the gut bug you picked up, and then that's affecting the gut barrier, and then you're training CrossFit 4 days a week. That's affecting it. So it's really difficult to just go bang, bang, bang. So we're hoping to zoom in, but also help you wrap your head around the whole picture of this.
Yeah, it's really tough, right? Like, let's go look at your situation, Evan, if you don't mind. So,
Sure.
You had some blood sugar issues, right? You also had 3 major gut infections: Giardia, Crypto, H. pylori, 3 amigos. You also had some potential tick bite stuff, right? And then we also had some chronic mold exposure. So it's like if you just went and saw like the mold specialist, you'd still be sick. You know what I mean? Because it's not just about grabbing the mold. Now, the mold was important, but, we also worked on blood sugar, made sure you were getting enough food, make sure you're digesting your food. You started gaining weight. You supported the adrenals, cleared out the infections. Then we saw there's all this chronic mold. Let's work on the mold stuff. You also, in between there, address some of the cavitation stress that may or may not have been a big issue. By the way, do you think the cavitations were a big underlying issue in your health issue? Or do you think it was just kind of a side thing?
It's tough to say because the heart palpitations that I had for years, I mean, when I was living down in Austin, I was 20 pounds lighter than I am now. So
you were really skinny.
Yeah, so I put a lot of weight back on, thank the Lord. And my wife did too. Here's the interesting thing. We thought that she was just skinny due to breastfeeding, because she had been lower weight than she was when she was in high school. And we thought that it was just breastfeeding all the time. But no, it was probably the mold exposure, because when we got her on binders, her weight restored back to normal. So to answer the question about the cavitations, I mean, I was having heart palpitations almost every single evening. I'd sit down on the couch and then, oh my God, the heart palp. And then as soon as I got that night of the cavitation procedure, when they cleaned everything out, that was the first night I didn't have heart palpitations for, I don't know, at least a year. So it stopped that immediately. My blood pressure
But the question
swings.
becomes like, well, because you were already in pretty good shape before that, what if the mold was addressed before that? Would the heart palpitations even been an issue? Would the cavitations even been able to cause a heart issue? Does that make sense?
I don't know. Well,
it's hard to say.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because I have a lot of patients that come in and no one has, very little people have unlimited resources. So like, where do we start? And when you have like big picture, people say like mold or like cavitations or heavy metals, like they're thinking a lot of money is going to be thrown at those resources. So our job is to be like, well, how do we prioritize it? How do we get the best results, for the least amount of money?
Yeah.
And that's really the tricky thing, because when you go to like myopic practitioners that are the cavitation person or the mold person or the Lyme person, it's very hard to get or the gut person, it's very hard to get a holistic perspective, because what they're going to be doing. You're seeing that person. That's what they're going to do. That's their shtick.
Yeah. And the truth is that my blood pressure issues, I was having these weird blood pressure spikes. Those mostly resolved. But the mold exposure, another re-exposure to mold, didn't happen for a couple years after that, and then the blood pressure issues came back. So did it temporarily fix some sort of orthostatic hypertension type stuff and some hypoglycemia stuff? Maybe, but it was, you have to travel, so the expensive travel plus $5,000 for the procedure. So you could have bought a lot of binders for $5,000. That's a lot of charcoal.
Or home remediation stuff. But, just kind of setting the tone for people that are listening, being a patient myself, right, and helping to fix myself and you as well and working together, it's really overwhelming. But I just want listeners to know that if they want to find someone like you or like me who have been through this and have the mind's eye and focus on prioritizing and really figuring out what are the first steps and doing things in an order of operation, I think that makes it less overwhelming. And that also plays into the whole stress, because if you're doing a treatment plan that's going to be so expensive or so segmented, like, oh, we're going to do the this and then that, then it becomes a little bit convoluted and hard to jump on board because you feel like it's going to take so much out of you to get going.
True. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And I would say that every step along the way that you've had in your health journey, every step along the way I've had in my health journey taught us a lesson. Maybe it wasn't the secret sauce, right? But let's say it got me 10% better. That 10% better was what I needed to regain the weight that I lost from my parasite infections. And then getting the exposure and then using detox solutions, that got me maybe 50% better. And then using immune supportive herbs and antimicrobial herbs, that gave me 10, 15%. So I think what you're saying in so many words is that many people come in kind of thinking that they have a need for a silver bullet, if you will. And it's kind of like, hey, Dr. J or Evan, I think I've got this parasite and that's wrecking me. And then we do all the labs and we see there's no parasites. We see it's actually a huge candida problem, or it's a huge nutrient deficiency, or major gut inflammation, or something like that. And so we focus on that, and then they're 80% better. And then we kind of go back and we're like, hey, remember how you thought it was parasites? Well, look at the 80% progress you've made by pursuing this and that instead. So back to the bloating conversation, when we're looking at somebody that comes in and it's like a major complaint like bloating, what is really interesting is when you unpack all of it, there's actually more coming along with it. So it could be like, yeah, bloating is the uncomfortable part, but then you look at the bowel habits, and then you look at the disturbed sleep and the teeth grinding, and then you look at the skin rashes, and then you look at the dark circles under the eyes, and then you look at the 20 pounds of weight gain with doing nothing, and then you start looking at thyroid labs, and then, as you mentioned, adrenal. So I guess my point here is that it's okay and good to have a one primary complaint, but it's very rare for it to exist like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, 100%. So we want to prioritize everything. So we look at digestive support. We may look at infections. We may also want to look at fungal overgrowth. Now, a lot of times fungal overgrowth may come with the stool testing, but sometimes that can be missed. So we're going to look at clinical symptoms like fungal toenails or tinea versicolor rash or chronic yeast issues or chronic jock itch or those kind of things, right? Maybe chronic dandruff. We'll look at that. We may also run organic acid testing that will look at diarabinitol or oxalic acid, things that may give us a window of fungal metabolites in the urine. And then we may also run a breath test, too, to get a little bit more of a window of what's happening with other dysbiotic bacteria. And we may even see imbalances in commensal bacteria, which is normal gut bacteria. So a lot of times that always comes at the end, because if you have imbalances with infections, that will always or could drive commensal bacteria, normal flora out of balance. So we always want to prioritize things on that note. And of course, the diet's going to be a foundation. So coming off, we may typically lean more on a paleo side. We may cook more of the fibers down. We may lean more on lower FODMAPs, lower fermentable carbohydrates, especially if there's more bloating or gas, because those fermentable sugars, even in healthy vegetables like garlic and onions, could drive a lot of these problems. And people tend to lean into the fact of oh, I have SIBO, I have this infection, but sometimes like in Evan's situation, Evan had 3 major parasites. And so it's really good to have your mind's eye wrapped around it, because if he only thought he had H. pylori and then dressed H. pylori and the problem still persisted, you'd be going insane. You'd be thinking what's going on? So it's good to really have that holistic perspective and dress everything systematically. It just gives you the better chance that you're going to fix things, a lot sooner than later.
Yeah, and you and I haven't talked about this, but I've kind of come up with this theory that H. pylori is, in some of these other infections, are really like a secondary infection due to a primary mold exposure. So I remember being a kid playing in my grandmother's basement who had flooded on many occasions. All they did was turn on a couple of box fans, and it took several weeks to dry out. I guarantee I had H. pylori and parasite issues for many, many years. I had gut issues as long as I could go back into my childhood. I just wonder, because you and I have talked about this idea of commensal bacteria, and there's this argument, right, that H. pylori you could coexist with H. pylori and that it shouldn't cause any problems. But why is it getting so out of control, so out of balance? Now, granted, my diet was terrible as a kid and all of that, but what if the immune suppressive aspects of mold toxin weaken the immunity so that I wasn't able to fight off candida, I wasn't able to fight off H. pylori, and that's what allowed those infections to thrive and take over?
Exactly, and I think a lot of it, the argument is more at the level. Maybe there can be a tiny bit of H. pylori present, but when it hits a certain threshold, right, then there's a greater chance that it can cause a problem, right? And then, of course, the more food allergies you're consuming that are going to inflame the gut, now that maybe makes it cause a problem. And then if you have enough decrease in stomach acid and enzymes from the H. pylori, that can cause a problem too. I mean, we know Dr. Marshall, who got the Nobel Prize for discovering H. pylori, I mean, they thought he was crazy. He had to give himself H. pylori to see that it caused ulcers and infections, or it can, right? So we know there's a connection with it. So kind of my issue is, let's lower the infections, fix everything else, and a lot of times people get better and get better much faster. The problem with a lot of people and a lot of medical approaches to an infection is the antibiotics just drop a bomb down there, and they may not get the infection, and they may create rebound fungal overgrowth and disrupt the immune response. So a lot of times you can get sicker from antibiotics with some of these chronic gut issues. So you really have to be addressing the problem holistically.
Yeah, well said. So, I mean, if you go to a conventional doctor and you do get diagnosed with H. pylori, the first problem is the testing is really bad in the conventional world. And so a lot of times they'll miss the infection. But if they did find the H. pylori, they'll do triple or quadruple therapy, 3 or 4 antibiotics at the same time, often multiple rounds of that due to the antibiotic resistance. And then, as you mentioned, now you've got even more. Let's say you came in with bloating, as we talked about, but you went the conventional rabbit hole. And then now you've got the yeast problem, and then you've probably got even more bloating there. So, I would never do this study, but it would be very interesting to test this theory if you take 10 people that have high H. pylori that also have high mold toxin that we know is suppressing the immune system in various ways. What would happen if you just focused on a mold detox protocol? Would the immune system gain the upper hand on the H. pylori to get it back in balance? I would never test that, right? We're always going to do both at the same time, use antimicrobials and use detox support at the same time. But it'd be interesting to test this theory of it being a, quote, opportunistic bacteria, that in theory, you could shut it down if the immune system was strong enough.
Yeah, and then kind of my theory, if I am going to address any mold toxins initially while doing other foundational stuff, I mean, my general theory is don't dump too many toxins right away. If I'm going to do anything, I may just gently nudge in some binders or some gentle lymph support, but I'd probably spend more of my time and effort fixing the home if there's an acute exposure on where those infections, where the mold may be coming from. What's your take on that and how you periodize that?
The home is always part of the investigation. So if you see that there's like high levels that show up and people are like, okay, why are you going on a tangent about this? Well, it's a huge gut issue. If you just look up Dr. Richie Shoemaker, he's a guy who's been working on these issues for 25 years. Tons of people manifest only as gut symptoms. So that's just the disclaimer. But if we see that something shows up on the urine, then we're going to go to the house to try to match up the species and see, okay, because you're growing aspergillus in your gut. You can see it on the organic acids now, at least on Great Plains. They've got on the first page, they have certain markers that are tied into aspergillus. So you can kind of see, hey, you've got mold colonization, and then we'll try to look and see if it matches up to the house at all. And in some cases, it doesn't at all. It's like the house has fusarium, but the gut has aspergillus. So yeah, the house could be a problem, but it looks like it's more you internally. You're more of a factory or a manufacturing plant. So then we'll just throw in some silver or something else to try to knock that internal colonization down, and then still working on the other stuff. It's rarely a number one priority, as you mentioned. It's like, hey, here's a little binders, here's some antifungals that also will happen to kill the candida overgrowth that you have, and plus these other herbs that we mix it with are antimicrobial, so that'll knock down some of the bacterial stuff you have. So it ends up being like a 3-in-1 combo, and assuming the constitution of the person's strong enough and maybe we need extra liver or adrenal support, they usually do fine.
Yeah, I always pause going after mold right away. I just find that, well, if there's a lot of symptoms or we have a lot of house symptoms, right? Any visible mold, telltale sign. Any chronic humidity in a home, telltale sign. If we see things tend to be a little bit more moist on the wall, right? We can get a moisture meter. We can detect some of that stuff. History of leaks, those kind of things. Then we'll definitely just do a simple house test, because the thing about a house test is if you got 5 people in the house, then all 5 benefit from that test. So It's kind of like a 5-in-1. So I definitely like the house testing, because it definitely gives you your best bang for your buck, number one. And then we'll typically remediate or address some of those things. Or if we don't see any big red flags, we'll just maybe get a higher quality air filter. So we'll do a lot of the Austin Air stuff, which is a great one because of the zeolite and the activated charcoal. And so for Austin Air, justinhealth.com/shop. Evan has his site as well, evanbrand.com, store button. If you guys want to get a high-quality air filter that we personally use with patients and ourselves, that's a great option. And then for me, I tend to always pause that stuff because I can see major benefits a lot of times without that, but we'll kind of put it on that treatment plan, on that path. I like to get gut stuff fixed first, because a lot of times the body will dump a lot of mold via the hepatobiliary system, right? Hence, Shoemaker and a lot of these protocols binding up stuff that comes from the liver and gallbladder, right? So that's kind of my approach to it, and that dovetail with bloating, because if we have digestive issues, you really want to make sure people don't think their digestion could be affecting detox, right? They kind of think of those as compartmentalized things, but if we have digestive issues, it could easily be impacting detoxification. So whether it's metals or mold or just general pesticides from conventional foods, all those could play a role, and your digestive issues could be affecting that.
Yeah, and here's the funny thing. You and I had 1,000+ cases under our belts before we even became educated about mold. So it does pop up into our conversation a lot, and a lot of people come to us and ask us these questions, and we've done some really great interviews about this. But the funny thing is, we were getting people better before you and I knew anything about it. So I do want to focus on, or at least point that out. Now I think it's just helping us to add an extra puzzle piece to the puzzle, because there are certain cases where resolving the gut issues, like the parasites and the bacterial stuff, you'll look at the gut report, right? We'll have side by side. Oh, great, we cleared out the infections, but we still have these symptoms, the brain fog, the dizziness, the sleep issues, right? So now we know, hey, that other puzzle piece could be this, because we did clear out the gut infections. But I would agree with you and argue maybe 80-90% of the time you could resolve those type of symptoms, the bloating and such, just from the gut issues, the liver, the gallbladder support alone.
I get scared for my patients, or any patient that comes in and is going to see just a Lyme practitioner or just a mold practitioner. I get really scared if they haven't done the foundation, because with practitioners like that are so myopically focused, anytime they're treating the Lyme or treating the mold and they have a negative issue, that has to be die-off, and that means we're on the right track. So it becomes this kind of vicious cycle where by them feeling worse, it supports them continuing to do that thing, which them feeling worse may mean it's the wrong thing, or it's too fast, or it's not in the right order. And a lot of times those protocols can be very expensive, especially if you see a Lyme practitioner that does antibiotics and you're on antibiotics for years. That can be scary. Or if you're looking at a home remediation and you don't know how to do it the right way, and you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars on a home remediation, that can be scary too. So you really want to be able to hit things in the most sequential way possible. And the biggest knowledge and understanding that I've dealt with the last year or two with you and me on our mold side is really how to fix some of these mold issues with our homes as cost effective as possible.
Yeah, I wish I had my $10,000 back. I was just desperate. I was sick.
Enzyme therapy?
Yeah, for the enzymes. You know, I was sick. I was symptomatic. I didn't feel well. My daughter had stomach aches. My wife wasn't sleeping well. You know, and we were looking up holistic solutions. We didn't have time to fully do the research and figure out what we know now. And here we go, dropping 10 grand. And my situation was no better. And even in some cases, it was a little worse. And so, I don't want to turn this into the mold podcast, but just pointing out the fact that,
it's connected for sure.
It is. But the fact that you could pursue rabbit holes like that and be no better off, right? Symptomatically, I was just as sick as before, and that 10 grand could have been used for several years worth of adrenal support and liver support and gallbladders and binders and all the stuff I really needed. But I was desperate to fix the house, because to me that was kind of the blame. But I also had some internal gut digestive stuff going as well. So I guess the point really here is that you want to make sure you have all the puzzle pieces, and try to work with a practitioner who can be zoom in and zoom out, and that's what we try to be really good at. We try to be really good at making sure that if we do need to hyper focus, we've got the skills and tools to do that, where we're going to use this specific protocol this many times a day for this many weeks to address this infection. However, we may also need to zoom out and get your house in better shape and get your spouse in better shape in case they're reinfecting you, and we're also going to help with those pieces too.
Exactly. So just kind of recapping for people listening, when I work with a patient, when Evan works with a patient, we kind of have like our best practices list, and we really make sure we hit things. So, of course, we're removing the bad foods. We're dialing in the diet. And, of course, that could be more nuanced than just a really good whole food paleo template. There can be other foods, like we mentioned, FODMAPs on other sides, chewing our foods, cooking foods, those things. Or number two is replacing enzymes and acids, maybe bile salts. That's important. Sometimes other things need to be addressed, like prokinetics and such. Third is repairing the adrenals, repairing the hormones, repairing the gut lining. partly because of the sympathetic stress that may be driven by the hormones and how that can affect digestion and gut lining. Fourth hour, removing the infections, and this could be parasitic, this could be H. pylori, it could be bacterial overgrowth, it could be SIFO or small intestinal fungal overgrowth. There could be even, we could throw mold toxins in with that as well. And then the fifth hour will be repopulate, reinoculate good bacteria. 6 hour retest, and sometimes you come back with a new infection. That can happen, and that's frustrating. So there's a kind of an order of operations. And again, there may be certain deviations in certain ways we go deeper based on our experience, but that's just a general framework and how we'll dive in deep so we don't miss anything.
Yeah. It took my daughter 3 rounds. We've done like 5 stool tests on her, and she's not even 4 years old yet. She showed up with 1 bug, knocked it out, retested, new bug, got rid of it. Then H. pylori showed up, and then candida, knocked those down. I mean, it's crazy. So it can be a little bit of whack-a-mole. And that just comes with the territory. It took me several rounds too. We kind of joke about the gut being like an onion, having different layers of infections, but it does appear that they do kind of come out in layers. It's, is it possible that H. pylori, with that little tail structure you see in the microscopic images, is it possible it's burrowed deeper in the intestinal wall and it comes out later? I don't know. It's tough, but
it's hard to say. It's hard because with kids too, you can't quite hit it as hard either.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why, and again, that situation's pretty rare to go that many times. I mean, that's more on the extreme, but it happens. We always want to be upfront with people.
Kids are barefoot. They're out playing in the creek, playing in the dirt, so it's kind of like higher exposure.
Kids are a little magnet for critters, right? I mean, we kind of know that. They fall down. They have no problem picking up dirt, putting it in their mouth, the whole 9 yards. So yeah, I get that. Is there anything else, Evan, you want to leave the audience with today?
I would just say get a good workup on yourself. Could you just go to Whole Foods and go buy a bottle of oregano oil off the shelf because you read some blog that said that oregano oil kills fungus and that may be the cause of your bloating? That might work, but is it the full piece? Is it the full picture? Are you going to take it forever and then you kill the good bacteria and then you've got a more imbalanced gut than you did before? Maybe. So my advice would just be get a good workup. Try to have a practitioner on your side that's going to be able to look at all the pieces, not just zoom in on one tiny piece of the puzzle and convince you that's everything. And if you do want to reach out to us, we are those people. I mean, we do look at the full picture. So Justin's website is justinhealth.com. He's available worldwide for consults via phone, FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, whatever you got to do to connect. And my website is Evan Brand. Same thing. We both work across the world. So we're very blessed, very grateful to be in the opportunity to help you. So thanks for tuning in.
And then if you're listening here, 99% of people we don't get a chance to even see in person or, over the phone or such. So if you feel like you could benefit or your family could benefit, share this information. At least it's going to get people moving in the right direction, taking a couple of good action steps, and then put your comments below. Really want to know what your experience is, what's helped with you, etc. What were some of the missing linchpins to help your care? And also a thumbs up and a share. We really appreciate it. All right, Evan. It was phenomenal chatting, man. You take care.
You take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to BeyondWellnessRadio.com.